Here's me trying to make more content from my roots. I've lived in New Orleans my whole life, and I also love to cook, but for some reason I'm just not super well versed in the Cajun local cuisine, though I was still raised on many of the classics like gumbo and red beans and rice. I did a recipe for gumbo last year, so this time I'm going to show y'all how I make red beans and rice. It's a creamy, filling, and really heartwarming dish that we really love to eat around here. There's many ways to do it, and everybody of course has their own way, but it's actually really simple. I'm starting the night before with a half kilo or 1 pound of red kidney beans. This is the brand that we love around here, but hopefully you're able to find something similar. You could probably make this recipe with black beans or pinto beans or something similar, but the process should still be the same either way. Also, there are ways around having to do this from the night before. You could make the beans from dry the day of, but you can look that up elsewhere. I'm just emptying mine into a bowl and covering them with a few inches of cold water. Remember, they're going to bulk up quite a lot, so give them room to grow. I like to add a few pinches of salt here so that it can start to internally season the beans, but you do you. After these guys go night-night, you can check on them 8 to 24 hours later and see how much they've grown. Maybe this is what a proud parent feels like. I'm just going to strain these out and set them aside until we need them. Next order of business is prepping all of our vegetables. As you know, this includes a trinity as we call it in New Orleans. That is some kind of onion. I'm using yellow. One big one will do, but I have a half of one, so I'm supplementing with one smaller one as well. Also 4 ribs of celery and 1 green bell pepper. I also have 5 to 7 cloves of garlic, or 4 of them if you have massive boys like this. Then about 4 green onions, which I'm going to use the whites for the cook and then the greens for the garnish. And this is totally optional. I don't usually put this in my red beans, but I have some jalapeños in my fridge, so I'm going to use one of those. Take a few minutes to turn everything into a medium dice. You could be doing this on the side while you're heating up your sausage, but I like to do everything at the beginning just so I have my mise en place. I keep all my veggies in one bowl and then keep my garlic in a separate bowl because that goes in later. So speaking of sausage, I have 1 pound of andouille sausage, which is the king of smoked sausage in my opinion. It just tastes like all the flavors of New Orleans in 1 pack of meat. But it can be hard to find outside of here, so you can use any smoked sausage that you want. I'm slicing that into about 1/3 of an inch coins at a slight bias just to make it look nicer. So once you have all that ready, you can grab a large pot. I'm using my large cast iron Dutch oven. You can use any neutral oil, but I have some ghee that I need to get rid of because it's getting old. Just a couple of teaspoons to get the sausage going. It'll render out its own fat as it cooks. I'm going to keep those moving so all sides can get browned for about 10 minutes. You just want some nice brown Maillard reaction like this. That, as well as the fond on the bottom of the pan, is going to impart lots of flavor into our red beans. So before that fond burns, I'm going to pull out all the sausage and then dump in all my vegetables besides the garlic. You can do this on a high heat because the vegetables have tons of water that they're going to release. Just be sure that you keep them moving. You don't need to deeply caramelize these or soften them to a pulp, but getting them to absorb all the fats in the pan as well as lift off the fond and start to soften themselves takes around 10 to 15 minutes. Towards the end of that, I'm dumping in my garlic and getting that fragrant for about a minute. And lastly, I don't think this is traditional, but I do it in my gumbo as well. I add a few tablespoons of tomato paste. It's a deep flavor that I add into almost any fond that I'm making before deglazing. It adds tons of umami into the final product. I highly recommend doing it. So before all that burns, I'm going to add in a liquid to deglaze it. It varies here. Some people add just plain water, some people add chicken stock, some people add a combination. But since this is something I'm going to want to thicken up later, I'm going to add in something to start doing that now. Since I'm already going to have rice because this is red beans and rice, I can use some of the starch that I'm going to rinse off when I rinse the rice. I'm sure other cuisines do this, but I learned this from cooking Korean food. They use rice water like this to thicken up stews and soups. I've never seen anyone from New Orleans do it to make red beans, but I'm going to do it here. A lot of people add cornstarch slurries in later, but we have free starch that we can use now. So I'm just going to rinse the rice off twice in a strainer in a bowl, which is going to give me about 8 cups of water to use. You can see how cloudy it is. That's kind of like a cornstarch slurry, but a lot less concentrated. We can always thicken it up in other ways later, which we will, but this is going to help us get started. So anyway, I'm dumping little by little bit of that in so I can start deglazing the bottom of the pan. Don't add it all yet because you're going to have to figure out how much to use after you put the beans in. So after 4 cups of water go in, I'm going to add in those strained beans, stir that around with the vegetables, and then we can also add in our cooked and seared sausage. This is almost everything I need to get cooking, which some people stop here, but an old tradition in New Orleans was to use the ham hock from the ham that they smoked the day before. It's just a large pork bone with some meat left on it, and you can buy it smoked already at most grocery stores. This is actually a ham shank, which is a little different. It was just easier for me to buy one of these where I had to buy like 3 hocks to get those. Some people also use something called pork tasso. That's just another form of smoked pork. But we already have andouille sausage, which is going to give us some smoked pork flavor, so you could just stop with that. Up to you, but I'm adding my ham shank into this mix and trying to get it submerged. And I'm just going to add in like 2 more cups of that rice water just to get it over the beans and sausage. So as this water is coming to a boil, I'm going to start to season it. Since I didn't use any chicken stock, I'm going to use about a tablespoon of better than bouillon paste. Just mix that in and get it dissolved. Then about a tablespoon of Cajun seasoning. I love Tony Chachere's. And I add a bit more of oregano and some more garlic powder because I like those flavors. 3 dried bay leaves, and then I'm going to add a preliminary amount of salt and pepper, but we can adjust those later. So just stir all that and let it come to a rolling boil. And once it's there, you can cover it and let it simmer for a couple of hours. You can simmer it on the stove, but I like to do it in the oven at about 190 degrees Fahrenheit. You can let that go from 1.5 to about 3 hours. I let mine go for about 2.5 hours. You're just looking for the beans to be pretty tender. At that point, I'm removing the lid and pulling this out to the stove. You can see it's still very liquidy, and this dish is supposed to be pretty thick to serve over rice. So first, I'm going to put it over high heat and let it boil to start reducing a lot of that water. But another thing we do around here is take some of the beans out, so I'm just going to pull out about a cup of those. Try to leave as much liquid behind as you can, but you can pull the vegetables out, it's fine. And just make sure whatever vessel you use is just too narrow for you to fit your potato masher into it, so that you have to use a fork to mash this up. But yeah, spend a few minutes turning this into a nice paste. Releasing all the starch that's inside of these beans like this is going to help thicken up our sauce a lot. I'm adding that back into my mixture and then mixing all that in, and you can see how it starts to thicken it up. You could do a cornstarch slurry as well as this, but whatever you want is up to you. I let mine hard boil like that for like 30 minutes, and once it's done, it has this really nice pasty texture. It's something that you want to coat your ribs while you're eating it. That's how you know it's good Cajun cooking. While that was happening though, I pulled out my ham shank, which still has a good bit of meat on it, and now that it's braised for a few hours, it's nice and tender. A lot of people just throw this away because they've gotten the smoke flavor from it that they want, but I don't see a good reason to waste this meat, so I'm going to grab a couple forks and pull it apart, kind of like pulled pork. It tastes like smoked ham, very similar to the andouille sausage, and it's going to complement this dish very nicely. I put that back into my red beans, and then I mix that all together, and I can start tasting for seasoning. I'm going to add some cayenne pepper at this point because I like it spicy. Some more salt and pepper as you need. And then I think this needs just a little acidity, so I'm going to put some apple cider vinegar in. Be very sparing with this as it's very strong, just a teaspoon or 2 will do. Last but not least, I want mine to look a little bit darker because a lot of red beans and rice dishes look dark, and ours here is red, to be honest. So I'm going to cheat by adding some of this Cajun browning sauce. It's probably hard to find around you, so you don't have to use it. It's not going to change your dish. It has a few ingredients like salt and seasonings as well as vinegar, but the main thing we're looking for out of this is caramel color, which is totally artificial. The same stuff that they make your sodas brown with. Either way, it's going to help the appearance of this, which is going to help my thumbnail hopefully. Just a few splashes of that and mix it in until it's your desired color. I don't know, do you think it makes it look better? Either way, we're finished here. That's not too long to make something very deeply flavored like this. It comes out really well if you do it in a slow cooker like my mom used to do when we were kids, but this is just a quicker and less authentic version to get you there. So I'm spooning that into a nice wide bowl for serving, and this wouldn't be red beans and rice without the rice. So I steamed up that rice that we rinsed earlier, and I'm going to dump a bowl of that over these red beans. Finish with some of the greens from the scallions that we chopped earlier, and then as a final touch, I put a good bit of Louisiana hot sauce into my own bowl. I like the heterogeneity of having it on top of your individual bowl like this as opposed to mixing it into the entire recipe. You can just really taste it on top of everything, and I love that. A pretty cheap and low skill level meal that you can impress a lot of people with. Very easily scalable for a big crowd. This recipe could serve like 6 to 8 people. And it's a good introduction to Cajun food if someone you know hasn't tried it before. Gumbo will always be my favorite local food, but this one is right up there with it. Let's see how I did. Time for the taste test. I don't make this style of food enough. This is where my roots and my heritage are from, and I'm always thankful when I can sit down in front of a bowl or a plate of good home Cajun cooking. Hopefully seeing that someone that is Cajun growing up here, making this food in my own way, there's really no such thing as the only way to do something. Especially in the culinary world, we get really worked up about tradition and authenticity, but it's really just about making something your own and enjoying a type of food that you may not know about yet. But I've been waiting for this all morning, so I need to get in and get a bite of this. Got a bit of the rice, some of the beans, some ham, and then some sausage as well. Cheers. Yeah, this is everything that it needs to be. It just needs to be comforting, warming, just deeply salty flavored. I'm really glad I live here. And whether or not you put hot sauce in the actual recipe itself, I think it's still vital to have little drops of it on each and every individual bowl. That vinegary pop is characteristic to a bowl of red beans in my opinion. Just super deep and evident smoky flavor from the sausage and especially the ham hock. A really pretty cheap meal, all things considered, because most of the bulk of this is rice and beans. But most cultures have their own way of incorporating lots of beans into different soups or dishes like this. We should really be eating more of them anyway, even though this isn't the most healthy dish. It's not super unhealthy though. This is something that can be done on the stove or in the oven like we did, and there's a lot of people that do it in a crock pot or a slow cooker. That's what my family did growing up. If you'd like to see a version of that, let me know and we can make that happen. But there's just something about eating nostalgia like this, even if this isn't the exact recipe that I grew up eating. I don't care if I live here forever, if I move to a different area someday, this is always going to hit the spot. So thank you for letting me share a little bit of my culture with you. Let me know if you'd like to see anything else from this area of the world. I'm gonna enjoy the rest of this bowl on this peaceful afternoon. Thank you all for watching, be blessed, and I'll see you next time. Might need to make some more simple dishes like this to keep my videos going.